Hi guys, so I wanted to just update kind of a topic that I was discussing before. So I made a video a while back talking about both the relationship and the contrast between autism spectrum disorder, ASD, and narcissism or narcissistic personality disorder to be more specific. So the video has come to my attention and I just want to show you the video I made originally so you can kind of check that out, and I advise you check this out before you watch this video. So if you haven't seen it already, check it out. Definitely worth a watch. So I was just talking basically about how you can have both conditions. So NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, it's a personality construct, not a mental health condition or a neurological disorder like autism spectrum disorder, which is what yours truly has. But yeah, I was just talking about here how autistic people can also be manipulated easier by people with narcissistic personality disorder. And there's another creator that I've kind of been holding off on talking about, but I feel like it's important to talk about it here. Um, I've mentioned him before, but that's Professor Sam Vaknin because he's made a bunch of different videos basically discussing autism and narcissism. He's tried to relate them together. So there's a bunch of different ones there. And just for anyone who doesn't know, because I've watched a few different videos that he has. So he says here people with high functioning autism lack empathy and behave in criminal behaviors. And he's drinking wine when he's making this video. I think he's had a bit too much wine. That's him there. And this is the video if you want to check it out. He also did a seminar, which was actually quite interesting. When I watched that. So there's a few different videos he makes. You can see that there's a lot different videos that he makes talking about the relationship and the link between autism spectrum disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. He even went as far as saying that narcissistic personality disorder and high functioning autism, so level one, are indistinguishable. And he was making the comparison between high functioning autism, which I told you I don't like that term, people basically who have no difficulty, well, not no difficulty communicating, but they're not non-verbal, like the lower functioning autistic people would be. And he's basically comparing the two, and he does this quite a bit. So a lot of people, I think, look at him and they think, oh, well, he's admitted that he's a narcissist, so he's done that, and so that adds to his credibility. And a lot of people are doing this, and I think there's a reason for it. So I'm just going to get out of this now. That's him anyway, an Israeli man in Israel aren't looking too hot at the minute. There's also another channel that I just want to give a mention to here. So just get out of that for a second. So I'm going to share a few different things with you, but before I do, I just kind of want to mention that I think Sam Vaknin's videos are very interesting. There's a lot of interesting content there, but I want to also give a background and think why isn't he the most reliable source of information? Because he's an expert, he's a self-confessed narcissist. But it's not like he admitted to it. He had to actually be diagnosed and then be diagnosed again. He wouldn't accept the diagnosis originally. And I'm not saying, everything he says is bad. Every video he makes is terrible. Now, what I'm saying is a lot of his content is very interesting. It really reels you in. And that's because narcissists are very good at storytelling. They're very good at reeling people in. That's why he has so many followers. But by his own admission, he has zero empathy. None, nada, zilch. Even when he's talking about doing seminars, because he is a visiting professor in a lot of different places, and different universities. I want to kind of get into his credibility there and talk about that because is he an expert in this subject? No, he doesn't have a PhD in psychology, even though he claims that he does. I think his PhD is in philosophy. I don't think it's in physics. It's very hard to believe what he's saying, and there's a channel, Danielle Radden, and I want to give her a shout out because she made a very good point. He's a professional con man. He got arrested and went to prison in Israel for defrauding people. And that's what narcissistic people are. They're con men or women, can happen in either or, though it's more diagnosed in men. And then BPD, borderline personality disorder, will be diagnosed more in women than it is in men. But that's just biases that we have, biases and diagnoses. Like Sam Vaknin is no more an expert on autism than me. I'm more of an expert than him on that because I have the condition. It was said to me by a doctor that I can read all the literature in the world to you. You have the condition. You're more of a fucking expert on it than I am. And the same way, he's more of an expert on narcissism than I am because he has the condition and I don't, as far as I know. He's a very skilled speaker. There's no denying that. He's very good at speaking and makes very interesting videos. And not everything he says is complete bullshit. He does say a lot of interesting things. But there's a difference between being interesting and enjoyable to watch and listen to and sharing misinformation. And I think he shares a lot of misinformation. Because of the way he is, he also said and admitted he's the worst kind of narcissist there is, a malignant one. And there's a documentary called I, Psychopath. Um, and you see how he interacts with people. He's very exploitative, and he puts people down to big himself up. And I think that's kind of evident of what a narcissist is. And we're talking about someone with the actual condition. So I kind of want to have a look at his background and a few different claims he makes. And then I'm going to kind of talk about my own personal opinion. So look at it now. So what we're going to look at first is his education. So I think if he's going to make big claims like this, autism and narcissism are indistinguishable. Now he's talking about high function, we must add, but if he's going to say they're indistinguishable, who was he to say that? Let's have a look because you can't make claims like that if you've got no background in the subject. People say it's in physics, his PhD, but the only one I can find is philosophy. And no, it's not just Wikipedia. This is Wikipedia here, but it says PhD in philosophy. So it says Sam Vaknin is an Israeli author, author of Malignant Self-Love, as he keeps saying in every single video he makes, trying to sell his books. Um, but he's a consultant known for his work on narcissistic personality disorder, NPD. He served in the Israeli Defense Forces from 1979 to 1982 and completed his PhD in philosophy at Pacific Western University in California with a dissertation titled Time Asymmetry Revisited. Now, this university is now defunct, and you can check that out. I'm going to show you now anyway, but when you look up alumni, he pops up on that. But what he doesn't pop up as an alumni in is Technion. Technion is one of the most prestigious universities in Israel. And he claims that he studied there since he was 9 years old. Now, if they valued him at all or his opinion, don't you think they'd want to include him in alumni? Alumni doesn't just mean people who got a degree from there, it means people that studied there too. So we get into that now in a second. So let's take a look. Have a look at his CV here, Shmuel. That's Hebrew for Sam, my brother's name. So people question, well, did he really serve in the Israeli Defense Forces? I don't find that too hard to believe because Israel still has conscription. So he did what he needed to do, and then that was it. 3 years in the Israeli Defense Forces, I wouldn't look down on him for that either because you have to, you can go to prison for not doing it. So I believe that he did that. I don't really give it much thought, to be honest. This is his own writing, so don't be looking at this and thinking that this is gospel. This is what he says. With the women's top 10 sexual fantasies, I don't know why that's popping up, but this is his actual CV, what he's put on it. So Born in 1961 in Kiryat Yam, Israel. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Somebody who speaks Hebrew maybe can let me know. Training and education units, yeah, like I mean, lots of people have done their mandatory military service, and you can look down on them for that. I don't because the IDF, if they come knocking, you better go off and do your service, or they could arrest you for it, I believe. So, education completed 9 semesters in the Technion, Israel Institute of Technology, Haifa. PhD in philosophy, dissertation, Time and Symmetry Revisited, Pacific Western University, California, USA. Graduate of numerous courses in finance theory and international trading. So this is one that he mentions a lot, Brain Bench. That you have to update that every couple of years. It's like a safe pass that you do over here in Ireland, basically allowing you to work on construction sites. I've done that 3 times myself, but these e-commerce psychology counseling techniques, you have to update them every couple of years. So I wouldn't say that you should take this as gospel and remember this is what he's writing down. This isn't the truth. This is just what he's putting down. So financial analyst by Brain Bench, full proficiency in Hebrew and in English, which is true because he speaks very good English. And there's also an interview of him where he's speaking in Hebrew. He's Israeli, so it's not hard to believe. Business experience 1980 to 1983, founder and co founder of a chain of computerized information kiosks in Tel Aviv, Israel. Now, in 1979 to 1982, it says that he served in the Israeli Defense Force. So he was doing this while he was serving in the military. Don't know if I believe that either. Senior positions with the Nessim D. Gaon Group of companies in Geneva, Paris, New York, Noga, and Aprofilm SA, that's South Africa. Chief Analyst of Edible Commodities in the group's headquarters in Switzerland, Manager of Research and Analysis Division, Manager of the Data Processing Division, Project Manager of the Nigerian Computerized Census. Is he the one responsible for teaching them how to scam people? Vice President in charge of R&D and Advanced Technologies. Vice President in charge of sovereign debt financing with an extra G in there. So Sam, you slipped up. Too many G's. Now, so there's a lot, it's a very decorative CV. And I feel like the modern world really caters for people like him, that are highly narcissistic and self promoting. He lives in North Macedonia now, you see that there. And he gives lectures in mainland Europe, a lot of Eastern European countries, and he's done it in Nigeria as well, I believe. Seems like Israel have washed their hands of him, and he's done the same. You can check that out anyway. So healthy place, Shmuel Vaknin. And then we look at his education. So there's a lot of different articles that don't back up that he studied in the Technion. So let's look at it here. ResearchGate, I think it was. So you get rid of that now. If you look up ResearchGate, we'll find it. So here we are. And this is basically this is verified now. So I'll verify that I'm not a robot. I'll just pause that for a sec while I do that, and then I'll get back to it. So what ResearchGate basically is publications. So I think they're a fairly reliable source. I had to use a lot of their work when I was studying in university, Technological University Dublin. I have the degree on paper, so you can check that out. And I can always show people if anyone needs to see it, but you can't publish something here if you haven't actually done it. And they're fairly good at checking in on people, and they will discredit you if you don't actually have what you say you have. So philosophy and physics, as far as I'm concerned, the two aren't the same. Like I don't know how you can say doctor of philosophy and physics, like in brackets, they're not the same thing. Philosophy is the meaning of why and question and everything, but physics is more factual, you know, but it's more mathematical, I would have thought. So, Doctor of Philosophy, Physics, faculty member at the CIAPS, Commonwealth Institute of Advanced Professional Studies. I study cluster B personality disorders and I'm the author of books and articles on the subject. My YouTube channel, yeah, we all know about that, has 420,000 subscribers. My LinkedIn has 18,000 clinicians as followers. I am also the originator of the Cronin field theory in physics, much expanded by Ethan H. Sushard. There he is down there. I think that's his wife. I'm not 100% sure, but he says my wife Lydia, and that is Lydia down there. So you see how much, if he has any sort of promotion, or if he has any sort of popularity like he does on YouTube, you know, he has nearly 500,000 subscribers, and he probably has more, like, he probably is close to that now. I don't know if this has been updated, but he has a lot of subscribers, a lot more than me. So let's get that out there now. Yeah, that doesn't give you more credibility though. And you see here, like, Technion is not mentioned here at all. So let's have a look. Journal of Psychiatry and Mental Health. You see if he has any sort of popularity or position, he will mention it, you know, and he certainly loves to promote himself. So here he has California Miramar University, which is Pacific Northwestern University. It kept popping up as Hawaii, but that's their headquarters. It's kind of confusing. They're based in Hawaii and in California, but they're now defunct, just to make it clear. And then he has Technion Israeli Institute of Technology, but that's him again posting this up here. And you can see here, he was born in 1961. So he started there in one of the most prestigious universities in Israel when he was 9 years old. Like, really, when I heard that, I found it quite hard to believe. And what a narcissist is famous for? Lying, pathological lying. And when we all think we're going to see it coming, but because they're so convincing, you know, like they'll just lie without any sort of flinching or emotion, we believe them. You know, we think, oh yeah, I'd be able to spot that, but lots of people are full of shit and don't actually spot it because they say it with such a straight face. We believe them. And just because he admits that he has narcissism does not mean that he's a good person automatically, you know. I think it's a good step, but he didn't accept it first, and he was like he had to do mandatory counselling while in prison, where he denied that he actually had the condition, and then eventually he had to accept it. So there's a lot of different posts here by him. Go back out of that. See Google Scholar now if there's anything up here. You can just check that out. Professor in CIAPS, Cambridge, UK, Nigeria, Canada. Okay. He does have interesting points on things, I will say that. But there's a difference between being interested and, you know, telling the truth and being a good spokesperson for something. You'll see it here, like he'll just keep mentioning 9 semesters in Technion. This is again him. He's talking about cold therapy, and you can look that up. Basically, what it's just talking about is how do you even put it? It's like denying people narcissistic supply, but he can go into that in more detail. It's his theory, so you can look that up and see what he says about it. But if we look at it here and we actually type it into Google, so Technion University, this isn't an exact science, but Technion Israel. So we're looking at it here. Let's take a look at Technion University. TIF, just like IT Tala or Tala IT, where I went, is literally Tala Institute of Technology, TIT, but this is TIT with an extra I for Israel. So if you go in here, you can just see the alumni, so the famous alumni. And this is just people who've studied. It's not necessarily people who've published work, but if he was as wonderful and marvelous as he claims to be, and people seem to think he is, wouldn't they want to be associated with them? Whereas they don't seem to at all. So we're looking at it here. So how old is it? It's quite prestigious. So established in 1912 by Jews under the dominion of the Ottoman Empire, the Technion is the oldest university in the country. So that's quite a big thing. Trinity is the oldest university in Ireland, I believe. The university offers degrees in science and engineering and related fields such as architecture, medicine, industrial management, and education. It's quite highly thought of, sorry. The selection of Hebrew as the language of instruction, defeating German in the War of Languages, was an important milestone in Hebrew's consolidation as Israel's official language. So if we go to scroll down here, aerospace engineering, actual engineering, humanities and arts, they do quite a lot. If we go down to the bottom there, let's just scroll down. So you can see some of their research papers if you want to check that out. You can look it up anyway, and you can find their papers. So then if we look at alumni, so we'll start from the bottom and I'll go through it slowly so you can see Yehuda and Zohar Zizapel, so co-founders of the RAD group, fathers of Israel's high-tech industry. Shlomo Zilberstein, computer scientist known for contributions to artificial intelligence, as well as a professor and associate dean at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. So there's a lot of people here mentioned. Zehev Tadmor, chemical engineer and president of the Technion. Yossi Vardy, remember Yossi Benayoun, the footballer? So we've got entrepreneurs, we've got contributors to Adobe, people who are involved in the Mars rover. Guillermo Shapiro. Is it Shapiro or Sapiro? Because I know the name Shapiro. Daniel M. Lewin, co-founder and CTO of Akamai. Jonathan Markovich, chief rabbi of Kiev, Ukraine. So quite a wide variety here, people. Yuval Nechamen, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Physicist, politician, and president of Tel Aviv University. Hossam Haik, scientist and engineer. Aaron Isser, aeronautical engineer. Ram Karmi, architect. Karmi makes me think of the bear in Karmi, Jeremy Allen White, also known as Lip from Shameless. Yossi Gross, Dov Froman, Danny Cohn, internet developer, David Cohn is who directs Futurama, which I'm binge watching a lot now. Harry Kutz, architect and urban planner. Israel Japan Friendship Association. Friend. Shimshan Brockman, Olympic sailor. And then Yaron Brook, president and executive director of the Ayn Rand Institute. You know who I don't see anywhere? So this is, unless I've missed it, but notable alumni. So Technion graduates have been esteemed to constitute over 70% of the founders and managers of high-tech businesses in Israel. 80% of Israeli NASDAQ companies are founded and or are led by Technion graduates, and 74% of managers in Israel's electronic industries hold Technion degrees. In the book Technion Nation, Shlomo Maital, Amnon Frankel, and Ilana DeBare, or DeBare, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but document the contribution of Technion alumni in building a modern state of Israel. So you can see here as well, they're not necessarily even, it's not like they're bigging it up to say, okay, this is what they've contributed to Technion. They've also contributed to things like Yahoo, Starkware Industries, Starkware, Tony Stark. And if we go through it again, Sam Vaknin is not mentioned anywhere. Like you think they'd mention his books, and Malignant Self Love is one of the books that I remember because he keeps saying it all the time. So it's lodged up there. I'm not seeing his name there. And we look up how prestigious this is, because why would you want to be associated with this? Kind of reminds me of MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. It's I think it's produced the most contributions to science and engineering in the world. MIT. It's very famous. It's produced some geniuses. Elon Musk, I think, went there. Just to name a few. So the top 100 universities in Israel, or worldwide, sorry. Three Israeli, that's right, three Israeli universities ranked among the top 100 worldwide. So this is from 2004 Shanghai ranking, and it's Hebrew University, the Technion, and the Weizmann Institute of Science as among the best in the world, with Hebrew U rising 5 places to 81st. So let's see where it ranks worldwide. So the Weizmann is 69th. Where's the Technion? 85th. But it's among the top 100 best universities. So of course you want to be associated with them. But guess who's not mentioned on the alumni? Sam Vaknin. Whereas he is mentioned in Northwestern, sorry. But we get into it here. And I was thinking, is this the right one? Like, do I have the right one? Because it said it was Hawaii. It's now defunct, as I said before. Private medical school. So it's a private medical school in Yakima. I wonder if I've got the right one. Have a look at alumni down at the bottom. No, I need California, not Washington. Greg Belt, in case you're looking. This seemed a bit more prestigious than I need California. Not that. Look up Miramar. Miramar. The stool. CMU. That's where Sam Vaknin claims he studied. I think I'm looking for Pacific Western, not Northwestern. EW. Yeah, there we go. So Hawaii. See how he wants to be associated with CMU, California Miramar Institute, or sorry, University. So it was an unaccredited university. What exactly does that mean? So here we go. Higher education accreditation, try saying that three times fast, is a type of quality assurance and educational accreditation process under which services and operations of tertiary education following the completion of secondary education. Okay. Institutions or programs are evaluated to determine if applicable standards are met. If standards are met, accredited status is granted by the agency. Okay. So, I'm just going to pause that there and then we'll get into this. So, usually I start outside in the video and then I go inside. It's today I'm doing the opposite. Uh, See there. Beautiful. Hopefully it stays that way. Let's see how we get on. So I moved myself up here anyway, and just carrying on where I left off, so talking about Sam Vaknin and basically like showing that he has no verifiable connection with the Technion Institute of Israel. Or sorry, yeah, Technion Institute of Technology Israel. And you can't find him in the alumni section, though he mentions it a lot, and he claims something that sounded quite unbelievable, that I was 9 years old, nine, when I went to study at one of the most prestigious, and you saw it there, the 85th best university in the world. It might sound like nothing, but there's a lot of universities, so to be up there um, is definitely impressive. So then anyone associated with that university would be thought of as higher, and you think to yourself, if they actually valued him, wouldn't they mention him in the alumni? I thought they would have done anyway. We see here, though, in Pacific Western University, based in Hawaii, which is an unaccredited university, which closed in May 2006 following a lawsuit filed by the state of Hawaii a year earlier. And then for the private for profit university, formerly named Pacific Western University, California, see California Miramar University, which is where he claims to get his degree from. So it's unaccredited, so it's not prestigious, and someone like Sam, who is a diagnosed malignant narcissist, they're going to hype everything up, everything good about themselves or how people view them. They're going to really emphasize that. Like you see how he boasts about how many subscribers he has on YouTube and how many followers he has on LinkedIn, of which are professors, basically, look at who I'm associated with. So, yeah, even though he admits to his flaws, I think he's trying to frame it in a different way and kind of say, I'm not the problem. You guys are the problem, And by saying that I was a 9 year old prodigy, like a genius, what he's doing there is he's saying, I'm just on a different plane to you. That's the impression I get anyway. Yeah, it looks like it's going to start raining, so I'm going to go back in. Here's the hoping to go outside. I tried, but couldn't manage to in the end. So basically, what I was saying there was Sam Vaknin describes himself as a child genius. He says his IQ was like 240 or something, like really unbelievable figures. And he presents himself as well as he can, but he talks about other people, other narcissists, and says all the negative stuff about them, and he views empathy as a weakness because he has none himself. But whenever it comes to me, myself, and Irene, me, myself, and I, he always seems to then revert back to a very primitive style, really defensive. And if you watch the documentary I Psychopath, he always brings a copy of his signed book to these professors and geniuses, people who he values quite highly, and he's always there. Here's a copy of my book, smiling at them. But it might look like from the outside looking in that he's giving them a gift. What he's basically doing is, oh, someone like this would be honored to read my book. He thinks so highly of himself that people are going to want to read what he has to say all the time. Experts are going to want to read it. And then one of the experts doesn't agree with him and questions the validity of his university degree. And he just shits all over and starts saying, "Oh, well, I want to see your stuff," basically flipping it. And it's so obvious. I don't know if he's playing into the camera or trying to make himself look better or look more narcissistic or if he's just acting up for the camera. But it was quite pathetic the way he just switched to, "Oh, I want to see all your accreditations." And when he's called out and people ask to see his accreditation and say that he's not a valued member of the psychiatric community. Yeah, and I'm not claiming to be, I'm just giving my opinion on what I observe, but it's the fact that he acts like an expert in everything and tries to make everything connect back to narcissism, which I think is just not on, and I think let's question him. While he might be interesting to listen to, he talks a lot of shit. I probably do as well, but try and back it up with facts. So here we have Pacific Western University, defunct, yeah. The university was an unaccredited institution based in Hawaii and was by far the largest of the three Pacific Western universities offering degree programs in a wide range of disciplines. So, in various different countries. So, it's unaccredited, so it's not as valued as a proper university degree, let's say. So, like if I got a degree from Princeton, Harvard, or Yale, the Ivy Leagues, obviously I'd be valued much higher. But even in that, his degree is in philosophy. It's not in psychology. It's not in dealing with people and mental health. He's not an expert in that. It's actually like I talked about this case before. Roy Meadows, who was a pediatric physician, so a child doctor basically, and he gave evidence on statistics, which he was not an expert in. But because he was a pediatric doctor, people assumed, oh, yeah, he must know what he's talking about, which is the danger of assuming that just because someone's an expert in one field, they're an expert in another. It's literally like saying that because I have a degree, in philosophy or I have a doctorate in something, that I'm an expert on cars. Like, I know it's more ridiculous, right? And I realize how it sounds, but you're given evidence on something that you know very little about. No, just my brother outside. um, and Sally Field, who was sorry, I'm just going to check and see. That's Sally Field. She's not. Um, Sally Clark. Sally Field is the actress, of course, that played Sybil in the movie, the autobiography. But what I'm getting at here is Sally Clark was convicted of murdering her two sons because Roy Meadows, a pediatric doctor, pediatric physician, got up and gave statistical evidence, and then an actual statistician disproved his claim and said he's talking about his arse. He's not an expert. Basically, what he was arguing was that because Sally Clark had two boys that both died of cot death and sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS, basically what he was saying was one child dying by SIDS is fair enough. Two isn't. And I think she had a daughter or something, or that there was a genetic link. So she had a gene that she was carrying. So I know a little bit about genetics because I studied it in university, but you inherit X chromosomes from your mother and Y chromosomes from your father. And if you're a man, that is. So both her sons inherited the same X chromosome from her, the Y chromosome from the father, but her X chromosomes that she was carrying, while they were recessive in her, and obviously she didn't have infant death or sudden infant death syndrome because she was still alive and able to have children, but she passed it on. She was a carrier for that X chromosome, which she then passed on to her two sons, and as a result, they both died. They both got that gene. which a geneticist would be qualified to give evidence on. Like I wouldn't be qualified to give evidence on that because I'm not a geneticist, but that's what happened. But because of what Roy Meadows said and people valuing his opinion the way they did, even though he wasn't able to give it, he wasn't able to give any sort of advice on that as an expert, you know. But they took his word as gospel, and as a result, poor Sally Clark ended up in prison. She never recovered from the trauma of it, and she drank herself into an early grave. RIP. And I talked about that in the Lucy Letby case because I feel like doctors are more than willing to throw nurses under the bus to cover their own arses. And that's actually an interesting video that Sam Vaknin makes. So when I'm talking about him, I'm not talking about him as someone who hates his content and thinks that everything he says is a load of shit. I actually really liked the evidence he gave. Well, not evidence, but he made a point that the most dangerous type of narcissist is a medical doctor because they're literally weighing up and messing with life and death. They have power over life and death. And I thought, no, he actually has a really good point there. And I think he's bang on with that. Thought it was a very good video. And he does make very good videos. But again, it's an opinion. We can't prove that for a fact. But I do think he has a point there. But he kind of contradicts himself. Well, he completely contradicts himself because he says always question medical doctors, never take their word as gospel. Yes, they know more about anatomy, the human body than you do, but you know when you're not feeling well. You know when you're feeling sick. You know your own body better than any doctor, anyone else. Full stop. So I think that's a very valuable lesson. But then he starts talking about in another video how people are now sudden experts, you know, the age of narcissism, because we all think we know better. We all think we're experts. And I pointed out in that video, but you said we should all question doctors. We should all say we're experts of our own body. We know when something isn't right. I agreed with that video 100%. I think he completely contradicts himself by saying question a doctor because nobody is more of an expert in your body than you, but then laughing and smirking and saying everyone is an expert now. Everybody knows better than doctors, and everyone is a doctor now. Basically, I thought you've just kind of undone yourself with that one, which he does quite a bit. And he is no more an expert in autism than me. In fact, I'm more of an expert in autism than he is by virtue of the fact that I have it. He's more an expert in narcissism because he has the condition. With me so far. But looking at this anyway, I want to see why it's defunct, Pacific Western University. So, in May 2004, the US Senate Committee on Governmental Affairs conducted hearings to determine whether the federal government had paid for or federal employees possessed degrees from unaccredited schools. At the hearings, the US Government Accountability Office, the GAO, presented a report summarising an 8-month investigation. As the basis of the report, the GAO searched the internet for non-traditional, unaccredited post-secondary schools offering offering degrees that met their search criteria. After the passage of the Homeland Security Act (HSA) section of 4107 of Title 5 US Code was amended. So get down to it here. So in 2004, investigative reporters from television station KVOA of Tucson, Arizona, reported that Pima Community College in Tucson, Arizona, had reduced the salaries of 2 faculty members who previously had been paid at the PhD level based on degrees. Sorry. So the KVOA of Tucson, Arizona, reported that the Pima Community College had reduced the salaries of 2 faculty members who previously had been paid at the PhD level based on the degrees from PWU, Hawaii. So basically, they were paid a higher salary because they had PhDs. But what they were saying was, this is an unaccredited university, so we shouldn't be paying you a PhD salary. Seems like a lot of con people went to this particular university. So when you look at someone, you look at how prestigious they are. you shouldn't look at this and think, oh yes, this person is up here as you know, a great human being, someone to be admired, someone to look up to because it's defunct. And the validity of the degrees was questioned, rightly so. So the two pay reductions were as a result of changes in US law enacted after September 11th, 2001, so 9/11, that prohibited federal employees from using degrees earned at unaccredited institutions for pay increases or job promotions. So he's a con man, Sam Vaknin. That's proven in a court of law that he conned people out of their money. And this seems to be full of con people, con men, con women, you name it. So in 2005, the State of Hawaii Office of Consumer Protection brought a lawsuit against the institution alleging that it enrolled fewer than 25 in state residents and used several websites, including www.apiu.ws, www.openuniversities.com, www.works.com, and www imedpwu.com to enroll distance education students from other places. And he was, I think he was in Israel at the time he got this, maybe he wasn't. On May the 9th, 2006, a state court received a default judgment in favor of the state agency, ordering Pacific Western University, Hawaii, to cease operation and assessing a civil penalty of 500,000 US dollars. The state of Hawaii has taken legal action against more than 66 unaccredited schools since the year 2000. Pacific Western University, Hawaii, and the affiliated Pacific Western University, Louisiana, were not accredited by an accrediting body recognized by the United States Department of Education. As such, the school's degrees and credits might not be acceptable to employers or other entities, and use of PW.P.W. we'll say PWU Hawaii, Pacific Western University Hawaii, and Pacific Western University Louisiana degree titles may be restricted or illegal in some jurisdictions. Not looking good. So actually, Barry McSweeney, someone from Ireland. So let's look at how this affected people because these are all linked. So there has been a lot of confusion. When I was actually looking up these universities, I thought, is it in California? Is it in Hawaii? And what's this about Louisiana now? Is it in Louisiana? It's in all of them. So there has been some confusion regarding the various Pacific Western University institutions. No shit. According to the official custodian of records for Pacific Western University, Hawaii, there was a third Pacific Western University, so three in total, one in Hawaii, one in California, one in Louisiana. There was a third Pacific Western University that operated in Louisiana from 1990 to 1994, so for 4 years. The school was a separate institution that operated under Louisiana state law. That's meant to be a very corrupt state, from what I hear. People from Louisiana can tell me. It's a very cool accent, though. I talked about that before. Leah G, 8010. I hope you're doing well, Leah. I hope you're all good. I know you're from New Orleans, Louisiana. It's like an interesting part of the world, but it affects Ireland too. So let's have a look. So in late 2005, it was reported in the Irish Independent that a chief science advisor to the government of Ireland, Barry McSweeney, so we're not innocent in this either. So Barry McSweeney had advanced his career using a degree obtained from Pacific Western University, Louisiana. Education Services confirms that McSweeney, they left out an E, they got it right that time, they left it out this time, but McSweeney was a graduate of Pacific Western University, Louisiana. McSweeney was forced to resign his position as a result, although the article stated that he had recognised graduate education as well and made no attempt to conceal the details of his PhD education. He claimed to be proud of his doctorate and stood over it. Okay, so common ownership of Pacific Western schools prior to 2005. Pacific Western University Hawaii, Pacific Western University California were once owned and operated by the same party. According to Inside Higher Ed, the association ended in 2005 when Pacific Western University California's assets were sold. So seems dodgy and like wonderful little old Ireland. We're not innocent in this. So you could see Barry McSweeney was a chief science advisor And he was operating, apparently, according to himself, that he had a degree from a recognized university, and he never hid the fact that he went to PWU, or not went because it's an online accreditation, but doesn't look very good for them, does it? They look quite dodgy. And this is the one where Sam Vaknin comes up as famous alumni. So common ownership of Pacific Western School, we looked at that. No relationship between PWU California or CMU after 2005. So Pacific Western University, PWU California, operated in Los Angeles from 1976 until 2005 when its assets, including its state of California state approval status, were sold to San Diego based California Miramar University, CM, CMU, CM Punk. So California Miramar University, CMU. I'm able to say that part right, but I'm struggling with the M and the W. Maybe I'm not dyslexic, but I'm having a dyslexic moment. I shouldn't be saying that because I get annoyed when people say, "Oh, well, we're all a little autistic." Hopefully, you can hear me all right. There's a bit of noise going on outside, but um, so CMU, the asset sale included an 18-month transition plan where PWU California agreed to teach out its active students in addition to other obligations. In early 2007, the conditions of the asset transfer were complete. PWU California officially ceased operation, transferring its state approval status to CMU. When CMU filed for accreditation later in 2007, the accrediting agency ruled that CMU and PWU California were entirely separate schools with separate academic standards. The accreditation agency stipulated that graduates of PWU California would not be eligible to receive CMU, California Miramar University. So people who went to Pacific Western University would not be eligible to receive California Miramar University diplomas or transcripts. Now that's very interesting because who claims to have gone to California Miramar? Sam Vaknin. So we look at it here. As CMU did not purchase the assets of Pacific Western University, Hawaii, or Pacific Western University, Louisiana, alumni of these two institutions, as well as alumni of Pacific Western University, California, would be ineligible for CMU. So diplomas or transcripts and should not claim to be alumni of California Miramar University. That is very interesting because guess who claims to be alumni of California Miramar University? Sam Vaknin. And look who's mentioned here. So we see the ones who are mentioned here in the Hawaii one. So they were all linked at one stage until they were shut down in 2005 by the sounds of it. It said 2006, but the investigation was in 2005. So Dan Voculescu of Romania. You see all these people here. Yeah, it's interesting because they all sound like they're from outside the US. Jun Tang from China, former executive of Microsoft China, received a PhD in electrical engineering from Pacific Western University. David Reardon, biomedical ethicist, holds a PhD in biomedical ethics from Pacific Western University, Hawaii. There's only one alumni here. Einbar, Barry McSweeney. He's the only one. Former Chief Science Officer to the Government of Ireland, holds a PhD in biochemistry from Pacific Western University, Louisiana. Only one famous alumni. That's quite dodgy looking, isn't it? Then look who pops up here. Sam Vaknin from the Pacific Western University, California. And he claims to be alumni of California Miramar University. So is he trying to hop on and say, oh, yeah, well, now they own Pacific Western University, California. That's where I studied. So now I can claim that I'm alumni from there. Doesn't work that way. Because you see very clearly that they have no relationship. It says it even here. They have nothing to do with it. California Miramar University seized the assets of Pacific Western University, California, but the degrees are not valid. Bingu wa Mutharika, president of Malawi, has a degree from there. So, yeah. Sam Vaknin, Israeli author, lists a PhD from Pacific Western University in Encino, California, on his curriculum vitae for study of philosophy for physics. So, I want to just look up Barry McSweeney while I'm here. Einbar, weird, weird name. So he also has a degree in Trinity College Dublin, which is the most prestigious university in Ireland. It's up there anyway. So the most prestigious universities in Ireland would be UCD, University College Dublin, Trinity College Dublin. You also have University College Cork, so UCC, which he also claims to have attended. So the diploma controversy, we read through it already there, but um, as this is related to Ireland, I'm interested to read this. So, diploma controversy. McSweeney was forced to resign from his position as Chief Science Advisor after the Irish Independent discovered in October 2005 that his PhD degree was from an unaccredited institution that had been the subject of numerous official investigations, state bans, and media exposés in the United States, and that it had been obtained after just 12 months of study. So, just for context, I had to study for 4 years for a level 8 honours degree, which would not qualify me to be a chief science advisor. He only did 12 months. They obviously felt that it was significant enough that he should be removed from his position. So, not looking too good. I wouldn't hold much admiration for Pacific Western University. It looks like a dodgy institution, or was, should say. So the opposition political parties, the Labour Party and Fine Gael, criticised the government for failing to properly assess McSweeney's qualifications. They do that all the time. That's another issue with Ireland. So I've been talking a lot about how Ireland has forked out a lot of money stupidly for a bike shed, which is a bike rack, and then for a children's hospital that is now 4 times what it should be. We also don't check up anyone. We don't do background checks into anybody. Like how he was able to get into this position is beyond me. But he obviously presented himself well enough that he could, as Sam Vaknin does. It's the danger of just taking someone's word and believing what they say. Do your background checks. Do them on me if you want. So after leaving the science advisor position, he was appointed to a position as a research coordinator in Ireland's Department of Communications, Marine and Natural Resources. Yeah, like see, he's got them from very unprestigious universities like Comenius University in Bratislava. Like, is that he got a great gold medal? That sounds like something to give out to Donald Trump, if I'm being honest. The largest university in Slovakia. I'm not being funny, but like that wouldn't be a degree that would be considered anywhere near as good as a degree from Trinity College. We might have to look into Einbar McSweeney, but Sam Vaknin is our main focal point. And yeah, like it just doesn't seem he just doesn't seem like a very trustworthy human being. And I'm going to look into his actual jail time now, what he was charged with. So he claims, and we'll look at it again. Remember, we looked at his education. And what he claims versus what we can prove. Academia.edu. So again, he mentions California Miramar University doctorate. But this is all his writing. This is all what he put up. So he's going to sell it to you and make it look like it's better than it actually is. Again, he mentions completed 9 years of study. So when he was 9 years old, this is actually 8 years. If you did 9 years of study in the Technion, surely you'd have something to show for it, and they would mention you as alumni. As I say, my degree was 4 years, and I was a level 8 honours degree, not a PhD or nothing. I wouldn't argue with his military service because lots of people were conscripted, so fair enough. He would have been 18 at the time because it was 1979, but he also claims to have done PhDs in that time. So he can put whatever he wants on this. He's going to jazz up his CV to look as good as he wants. We all do, but I think he's embezzling more than just funds here. He's also lying to people and claiming to be much better than he actually is. What qualifications does he actually have? Sam Vaknin holds a PhD in philosophy from Pacific Western University, California, USA, with a dissertation titled Time Asymmetry Revisited. He also has completed numerous courses in finance theory and international trading. Vaknin is a certified financial analyst and he has experience in various business roles, including serving in the Israeli Defense Forces and founding a chain of computerized information kiosks in Tel Aviv. He has also published extensively in psychology, international affairs, and business studies. I think we just read through that, so, but nothing about Technion, like he claims. You see his Wikipedia page. I know it's not the most reliable source, but claims to have had an abusive childhood as well, which is how he got his NPD diagnosis. And you see this here, like, and he has said this before. His parents were ill equipped to deal with normal children, let alone the gifted. He just sees himself as superior to everybody. And he's not shy about saying it. So he left home to serve in the Israeli Defense Forces. I wouldn't doubt that, really, as I say. And that could be true and probably is. What he did, I don't know. No mention of Technion here from what I can see. So between 1982 and 1983, Vaknin studied for a doctorate at Pacific Western University, California. His PhD dissertation was entitled Time Asymmetry. We've said that already. In it, Vaknin postulated the existence of a particle chronon. He proposed that chronon interactions, particle exchanges in the time field generate time and time symmetry. As we observe them, okay, that's only 1 year, like as it said with Barry McSweeney, it's only a year and they're handing out degrees like they're going out of fashion. I wouldn't I wouldn't value the degree from there. So by the mid 1980s, Vaknin was highly successful financially, but aware of difficulties in his relationship with his wife, including severe mood swings. He sought help from a psychiatrist who diagnosed him with narcissistic personality disorder. Vaknin did not accept the diagnosis. As he later reflected, I had no idea what he was talking about. He says, I tried to corrupt him, I offered him money, and having felt that I succeeded, I lost all interest in him. So he didn't tell me what I wanted to hear, so I disregarded what he'd said, and I paid him off. From 1986 to 1987, he was the general manager of IPE Limited in London. He moved back to Israel, where he became a director of the investment firm Mikbatz Teshua. Mikbatz. In 1995, Vaknin and two other men were found guilty of three counts of securities fraud related to activities with the firm. He was sentenced to 18 months imprisonment and fined 50,000 shekels, about 14,000 US dollars, while the company was fined 100,000 shekels, shekel and hide. As a condition of parole, he agreed to another mental health evaluation, which noted various personality disorders. So, according to Vaknin, he said that he was borderline schizoid, but the most dominant was NPD. So, schizoid, where you're not into socializing with people, you're quite asocial, but then borderline, where your mood is up and down all over the place, and we talked about that before. But then NPD, where you think that you're better than everybody, so you're narcissistic, you think that you're much more intelligent than everybody else, you're superior to everybody else by virtue of the fact that you're alive, you're just better than people, you don't need to prove it, you just are. So he was forced to get an evaluation. On this occasion, he accepted the diagnosis because he wrote, "It was a relief to know what I had had." He actually said, "Knowing what I had gave me some sort of relief." So, securities fraud, also known as stock fraud and investment fraud, is a deceptive practice in the stock or commodities market that induces investors to make purchase or sale decisions on the basis of false information. So, we look at securities fraud. So, that's what he is. He's a con man, and he's been charged with that. Investment fraud is a deceptive practice in the stock or commodity markets that induces investors to make purchases or sales based on false information. The setups are generally made to result in monetary gain for the deceivers and generally result in unfair monetary losses for the investors. They are generally violating security laws. Right. So it sounds a lot like Wolf of Wall Street, doesn't it? Jordan Belfort. And we know what Jordan Belfort did, and yet people still invite him to do speeches. He's a professional con man, and yet people bring him along to advise them on how to make money. He does TED talks, things like that. And he's a con man, and he was proven to be a con man, and he stole millions from people, billions even, I think. But people still invite him, because he's popular, because he's the person to be seen with, and that just shows you how stupid people are, quite frankly. You know this fella's a con man, so what's he going to teach you? He's going to teach you how to con people, how to manipulate people. Like, it baffles me. But if you're wondering, could people be that stupid? Yes, they could. And Jordan Belfort, I would hazard a guess, is quite high in narcissistic traits. Just gonna take a sip of this. So we look at it again, because Wikipedia isn't a very valid source, so I will look at it. So securities fraud, that's what you find every time you look it up. Reddit's hardly a valuable source either. Vaknin mystery. In 1990, Sam Vaknin was arrested and interrogated several times by the new securities fraud squad of the Israeli police. So he's obviously fucked himself up over in Israel and they don't want anything to do with him, which is why he left. He's in Skopje, North Macedonia now. Says it again, malignant self-love, samvactripod.com. He was arrested several times, yeah. Okay. Three counts of securities fraud with two other men, Nassim Avios and Dov Landau. Right, so that's kind of as much. He obviously doesn't want people digging into it either because that would obviously add less credit to him. Grokkapedia, I don't know what that is. Let's have a look and see. Doesn't sound like a valuable source of information here, but He obtained a PhD in physics from Pacific Western University, now California, Miramar University. But remember what it said, those degrees are not valid. So you can't now claim that I studied at California, Miramar University, because it was Pacific Western University, which is defunct, meaning that your degree holds no validity anymore. But he claims to have studied in California, Miramar University. And you notice how he talks about dates here? So here we are now. So he mentions dates, but he never mentions this date when he actually studied in Pacific Western University. Let's take a look. Distance Education Accrediting Commission, but lacking regional accreditation typically associated with traditional universities. So it's not a traditional university degree, and he only studied for 1 year. So Vaknin's professional background includes roles in international finance and consulting, such as senior positions at the NSMD Gowan Group and economic advising for the government of Macedonia, alongside a period of incarceration from 1993 to 1996 for securities fraud. Despite holding no clinical psychology license or formal therapeutic training, relying instead on self certification in psychological counseling from online platforms like BrainBench, he has authored dozens of ebooks and articles on personality disorders, served as a professor at institutions like the Centre for International Advanced and Professional Studies, CIAPS, CIAP, AIMBU, and built a significant online presence through lectures and videos analysing narcissism. His work has garnered a following among those by narcissistic abuse, but has drawn criticism for overstating expertise without rigorous psychological accreditations or credentials, with detractors, not detractors, detractors, detractors highlighting the non-clinical nature of his insights and the questionable prestige of his academic affiliations. So you see how he jazzes himself up even though he holds no grounds to do this. He's no expert in any sort of psychological field, and he does often try to claim that he's an expert in narcissism and that everybody is like him. And there's a fella called Jacob Skidmore, not Skidmark, Skidmore, the nameless narcissist. It was actually quite good to listen to as well, and also a self-admitted narcissist, but he also talks about narcissistic suicide attempt, which is very interesting to listen to, and I recommend you check him out. It's ironic that his name is Nameless Narcissist, and yet I've just named him. I've just outed him. But he has the same diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder as Sam Vaknin. But he says you don't speak for all of us. You're not talking about every single person with NPD. Just because you have it doesn't mean that we're all the same as you. And that's very true. Just like no two autistic individuals are the same. So, just reading through this, we've already read through a lot of it, but his mother was a Turkish Jew, and I believe his father was a Moroccan Jew, construction worker, apparently. His household as marked by dysfunctional dynamics, including strained parental relationships that he later referenced in developing his views on insecure attachment patterns and family-induced vulnerabilities. At age 17, Vaknin left home to enlist in the Israeli Defense Forces, serving from 1979 to 1982 in training and education units. So yeah, like training and education, you're not on the front line in combat, and he's never claimed to be. He's never actually said that, because I reckon if he did, people who have seen serious combat would have put him right in his place. People who could cause him physical harm. So he has recounted this period as an abrupt separation from family influences imposed by parents who were exasperated with his behaviour, providing early exposure to structured discipline and intellectual roles within a military context. And this part I think is really interesting because it's exactly what I was thinking. Vaknin has self-reported prodigious early intelligence, including an IQ score of 180, and precocious reading in fields such as philosophy, physics, and economics during his formative years in Israel. These claims stem from his personal accounts, which he ties to the compensatory mechanisms developed amid reported family stressors, though independent verification of the IQ figure remains anecdotal. In other words, this has never been verified. It's all his word, and we can't verify it. There was an interesting So there's been people that have mentioned before, both diagnosed psychopaths. There's an interview on Soft White Underbelly from a guy called Jay, and it's nihilist. So nihilist interview, he has that what I can only describe as a dyke cut. That's what we called it in school when someone would get it, and he's an overweight fella with a crutch, talking about how he could recite pi to 10 correct places, and I don't know what number he said he could recite it to, but 2.14, that much I know. And then after that, it's anyone's guess, but he says that he could do it, and I'll actually just see. I'm going to look it up. Yeah, so it's approximately, yeah, 3.14159. So the value of 2.14 is sometimes erroneously associated, yeah, but the correct standard approximation is 3.14. 3, not 2. Thought I remembered it there, but 3.14. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is because Jay said he could recite pi to 20 places or something. He gave some ridiculous figure. And then a fellow I mentioned as well, Lewis Raymond Taylor, another diagnosed psychopath, said he could do the same. Why didn't they do it? And my thinking is if they could do it, they would have done it because they love to brag about how much better they are than everybody else. Just like Sam Vaknin here saying that he has this intelligence. Do you see how he kind of deflects? So he doesn't ever say that I was a difficult child. He says the reason why I didn't get on with my parents was because of them, not me. I was too intelligent and they didn't understand me. But there's nothing to actually validate that. Nothing at all. If you look here again, he attended the Technion Israel Institute of Technology in Haifa, undertaking 9 years of studies in psychology, ecology, physics, and medicine through correspondence courses without obtaining a degree in any of these fields. Yeah, like he didn't get anywhere from it. So even if he did obtain, he never actually received any sort of accreditation. And there's nothing to verify that he actually went there. It's just his word, just like his IQ, which is apparently just so much higher than everybody else's. You always see this as well with people like him. They're so intelligent that nobody can understand. They don't get on with anybody because it's not their fault. It's everyone else's fault. They never take responsibility. So I wouldn't trust a single word that comes out of his mouth, to be perfectly honest. I thought I remembered the date. So yeah, 1982. He was a busy man, so he was studying all the time while he was in the Israeli Defense Forces. Never had a dull moment. So apparently he studied from 1970 to 1978, and then a year afterwards, he enrolled in the Israeli Defense Forces and then completed graduate level coursework in finance theory and international trading in the United Kingdom and the United States between 1982 and 1985. But he also did this degree as well, the PhD from the now defunct university. All sounds a bit dodgy and unbelievable, doesn't it? So it says, yeah, 1982 to 1983, Vaknin received a PhD in physics it was actually philosophy, not physics, from Pacific Western University, which ceased to exist in 2005, officially 2006, but I think 2005 was when they were like, we're shutting you down. From what we were reading there, it says either or date. It was either 2005 or 2006, and anything after that is not accredited to California Miramar University. So this degree does not carry over. So some accounts describe the degree as in philosophy rather than physics, highlighting inconsistencies in Vaknin's self-reported qualifications. Exactly, self-reported. The institution's historical accreditation status has drawn scrutiny as Pacific Western University operated without full regional recognition during the period of Sam Vaknin's enrolment. So he alleges that he finished studying for only 1 year there, back in 1982 to 1983, and since then it's been shut down. So that's 22 years before they were shut down. I imagine that they were a lot more dodgy back then because people have, they've clamped down on it, right, like rightly so. So back then, I imagine you could have gotten away with saying anything. I have a degree in selling snow to Eskimos, or a degree in shoveling shit. So this work, let's look at it now. So when he talks about chronons to explain temporal directionality, this work archived in this work archived in the Library of Congress as a microform in 1985 demonstrated his interest in interdisciplinary physics and philosophy, including challenges to thermodynamic explanations of time's arrow. He's great at jazzing up things to make himself look better than he actually is. So Vaknin has claimed an IQ exceeding 180, and I've heard him say it in the 200s, like above 200, based on multiple childhood and adolescent tests, positioning himself as possessing genius level aptitude that facilitated self directed learning across disciplines. However, absent independent verification, such assertions remain anecdotal and unconfirmed by standardized psychometric standards. His academic trajectory underscores a reliance on autodidactic methods and practical application, evident in the shift toward finance coursework over traditional theoretical training in psychology, where he holds no advanced degrees or licensure, potentially constraining the empirical rigor of his later contributions in that domain. This foundation prioritized causal modeling in physics, such as time asymmetry, over clinical methodologies. So then, like, he had business ventures. So what did he actually do with philosophy or physics? Nothing. He became a con man instead. And then we read through this, and he went to prison. Arrested in Israel for charges of securities fraud, manipulating stocks, and involved in attempted acquisition of state-owned agriculture bank. 3 counts of securities fraud, along with these two men, Nazim Avios and Dom Landau, with evidence presented of coordinated efforts to inflate share values through deceptive means. So he manipulated people. He sold them shares at a higher price than they were worth. Sounds a lot like the Wolf of Wall Street, doesn't it? And people are still, as they say, getting Jordan Belfort to come and do talks and speeches. And he clearly is not a very reliable source. He's a con man, he's a cheat, he's a criminal above all else. And yet people are still taking his word and bringing him on talk shows. And it seems like he had to suffer very little consequences for his actions by the looks of it. By the sounds of it, Sam Vaknin wishes he could be Jordan Belfort, even though he'd never admit to that. So Vaknin has stated that he has experienced 2 marriages, along with several serious relationships, including 2 engagements that did not culminate in marriage. After his release from prison in Israel, Vaknin relocated to Skopje, North Macedonia, the capital, in 1996, where he married Macedonian national Lydia Rangelovsky. The couple has maintained residence in Skopje continuously since the move, establishing a long-term partnership that has endured into the 2020s. His relocation followed his imprisonment for securities fraud from 1995 to 1996 and provided a stable personal base amid professional transitions, including the founding of Narcissus Publications. In interviews and writings, Vaknin has described his relational history as featuring patterns of initial intense idealization of partners, followed by phases of devaluation, aka love bombing, telling you you're great, wonderful, then bringing you right back down to earth, which he links to personal narcissistic traits. Sorangelovska has corroborated aspects of these dynamics to joint appearances, noting her decision to remain in the relationship through cycles of highs and lows, citing unconditional commitment as a sustaining factor despite prior experiences with worse treatment in other partnerships. So she's obviously used to being treated poorly. And so him coming along and love bombing her, she probably loves the chaos by the sounds of it. And actually, if she's the same woman as appeared in the documentary I Psychopath, she seemed to really crave his admiration, even though he was very abusive and condescending towards her, even verbally, you know. Like, he didn't hit her in the documentary because if he did, people would think he was a piece of shit, but he certainly spoke down to her, you know, and thought less of her. By his own admission, he says that he's not capable of love. So you'd wonder why she stays with him, but she obviously craves his opinion, and she was quite emotional, like very. She seemed quite rocky and unstable herself, you know. So, not saying she has anything like BPD or whatever, but that is a dynamic. Narcissism and BPD go together in relationships, borderline and narcissism. For some reason, I think it's because the narcissist provides stability to someone who is unstable in a condition called emotionally unstable personality disorder. And everything seems to be unstable in that. And don't take my word for it. People who are more qualified than me and Sam Vaknin have said that. So, the partnership's longevity contrasts with Vaknin's earlier relational instability, offering a consistent domestic framework for his Skopje based activities. So he is publicly self-identified as possessing narcissistic personality disorder, framing his condition as malignant narcissism in his 1999 book Malignant Self-Love: Narcissism Revisited, which draws on personal experiences and correspondence initiated in 1996. He describes this self-identification as rooted in professional evaluations from 1980s where he sought psychiatric help and received an NPD diagnosis, later extending his analysis to include psychopathic traits such as antisocial tendencies and emotional detachment. In other words, not feeling any sort of remorse or guilt for what you do and being completely detached from your actions, you know, no sort of empathy given. And he seemed to want to be diagnosed as a psychopath. It seemed like he thought being a narcissist is weak. I need to be further, you know, I'm on a higher level than everybody else. And he seemed to view psychopathy as the gold medal, you know, of personality types. He definitely views empathy and compassion as a weakness. You see that time and time again. So, according to Vaknin, malignant narcissism manifests in him through pervasive grandiosity, a profound lack of empathy, as he says a lot, and dominance of a false self that masks underlying fragility, traits he contrasts with less severe narcissistic styles by emphasizing their destructive interpersonal and self regulatory impacts. In applying his own diagnostic criteria, Vaknin posits that his condition involves a spectrum of standard NPD characterized by exploitative interpersonal patterns and entitlement per Diagnostic and Statistical Manual criteria to malignant variants incorporate paranoia, sadism, and psychopathic amorality, which he claims align with his observed behaviors like glib manipulation and impulsivity. So being fake nice, you know, that glib is kind of like superficial charm, be another way. I'm just gonna double check that, but that's what I think it is. glib, confident and persuasive, but often insincere, superficial, or shallow, indicating a lack of thought or honesty, which would be perfect, wouldn't it? That describes it exactly. So, glib manipulation and impulsivity. I want something, I'm going to grab it and take it. That would explain the stock manipulations and defrauding people. This self assessment underscores causal mechanisms he identifies, such as early trauma, fostering a compensatory, grandiose facade, so it's not actually real, though he acknowledges the limitation of introspective reliability given narcissism's inherent distortions in self perception. Basically, what he's acknowledging there is I could be getting it wrong because I have distortions in the way I think. So he acknowledges that narcissism inhibits the way you're able to self reflect, and look at yourself introspectively. I think this is all a bit too much mumbo jumbo. He has contributed a lot to research of narcissism, but talks about pervasive emptiness and the false self lacks genuine affect or continuity, serving instead as a regulatory mechanism. So, Vaknin's framework of narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, centers on the narcissist's internal void, filled by a constructed false self that supplants a suppressed true self, an infantile core rendered inert or dead through early developmental arrests or trauma. Basically, what he's getting at there is the trauma happened, and as a result, your inner child died. So you portray this image of someone who's better than everybody else, and that's not real. It's not actually you. But what we're actually getting is a false self and nothing else because the original self is dead. It's gone. So it's all very interesting, but also confusing. I understand that. I hope that makes sense anyway. The reason why I'm talking about this is because of his views on autism. And he's not an expert. I want to kind of make that point, that he's not an expert on this. And the way he talks about it is unhelpful and just adds further stigma to the condition. So we look at it here, VakninTalks.com. He's obviously someone who gets people think, and he probably loves the fact that I'm talking about him now, but no, not consenting. Bye bye. Right, don't want to get into too much of that, but he says so. Sam Vaknin's view on autism spectrum disorder are controversial and often criticised. He argues that individuals on the autism spectrum lack empathy and that those who identify as empaths, so saying I'm an empath, may actually be manipulative narcissists or psychopaths. I do think there's some truth to saying that someone could say I'm an empath and keep on saying that they're an empath to hide what they really are. So there's definitely truth to that. But to say that people with autism have no empathy and they lack empathy, it's completely wrong. Vaknin's theory suggests that autistic traits are closely linked to narcissism and psychopathy, and he critiques the concept of empaths as a form of manipulation. His views have sparked debates and discussions within the autism community and among health professionals. Yeah, he's made some very dangerous statements. Says autists manipulate. As we look at it here. So today I'm going to embark on a mission impossible to make myself even even a bigger hate figure than I already am. And I'm going to do this by referring to scientific studies that prove repeatedly over the last 10 years that number one, people on the autism spectrum disorder lack empathy exactly like narcissists and psychopaths. And yes, of course, I've been saying it for many years. So he's kind of like, I told you so, here we go. And I want to see if he actually cites any actual evidence to support this. Number two, so called empaths are actually narcissists and psychopaths who engage in deceptive virtue signaling. And yes, of course, I've also been saying this for many years. But now I'm adding to a corpus of videos that I've already made with two new additional studies. There are dozens by now, but two new additional studies. Right. I do recommend that you watch my recent video about victimhood, competitive victimhood. Is basically I suffered more than you. I have to admit, where I've seen this a lot is with people who have borderline personality disorder. Their suffering is always worse than yours. It's not a competition, but that is something I have seen. And narcissistic people will do that too, purely because they've suffered more than you. And if you achieve anything, it's usually because you had an unfair advantage, of course, or it's because they suffered more than you did. Otherwise, they would have achieved exactly the same thing. And I talked about growing up in a narcissistic family, on my dad's side. My granddad was always getting people to feel sorry for him. He was very cold and manipulative. He was always condescending and saying, "Oh, you're lucky to have what you have, and if only I had that back in my day." And people kind of give older generations a free pass to say back in my day, but he always used it to suit his own narrative. Like it was harder back in our day. He couldn't do anything for himself because his wife did everything for him. So how was that difficult? She did all the washing, the cooking, the cleaning. He couldn't do any of it. When I lived with him for a little bit, I got to see just how useless he was in that area. He didn't know how to do anything for himself. So yeah, older generations of men, they really had it more difficult. He never had to fight in a war or anything like that. He had people waiting on him hand and foot. It didn't seem that much worse, to be honest. You went to work, and once you came home, you had a meal presented to you. All the cooking and cleaning was done. The children were minded by the wife. So, just an example. My previous videos about autism spectrum disorder compared to cluster B personality disorders, especially high functioning autism spectrum disorders, he says they're indistinguishable. Okay, got the picture? I wish you a bumpy ride and let us delve right into what I have to tell you. So there's this new study, it's authored by Van Tricht, Colin S. Jorgensen, Nikolic, and others. It is titled Autistic Traits and Self-Conscious Emotions in Early Childhood. It was published in Childhood Development recently a few weeks ago. I'm going to read you an abstract. Self-conscious emotions arise from evaluating the self through the eyes of other people. Self-conscious emotions arise from evaluating the self through the eyes of other people. Given that children with autistic traits might experience difficulties with understanding other people's minds, they might show less attuned self-conscious emotions. So self-conscious emotions include guilt, embarrassment, and shame, and so on and so forth. Shame leads sometimes to avoidance and sometimes to other reactions. So there was this experiment, and in this experiment, the experimenter pretended that the kids broke his toy. The experimenter was playing with the toy, and then he said to the kids, "Oh my God, you broke my toy." He shamed them, he named and shamed them. So there was data. The experiment lasted almost a year and a half and was repeated very often. Here are the conclusions in the abstract. Children with more autistic traits showed less theory of mind. Theory of mind is the long phrase for mentalization, the ability to perceive or conceive of other people's minds and what makes them tick. Okay, so children with more autistic traits showed less theory of mind and more shame like avoidance. But associations were not mediated by theory of mind. In other words, the children's tendency to avoid shame were not the outcome of their inability to perceive other people's minds. This provides, say the authors, this provides initial evidence that children with more autistic traits may show disturbances in some, but not all, self-conscious emotions, which could hinder their social functioning. Nothing new here. This has been established in numerous studies in the past, but never with young children, like 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old. All the previous studies were conducted on adolescents and adults, not on children, but like 9-year-old children, 8-year-old children, not 2, 3, and 4. So they wanted to see if autistic traits are more associated with a deficit in theory of mind, whether autistic traits render the child incapable of understanding other people's mental states and predicting their behaviors, and whether deficits in the theory of mind, deficits in mentalization, are related to the experience of self-conscious emotions with emphasis on shame-like avoidance. You see how he uses this jargon to make himself sound smarter than he is. Now he's quoting them, paraphrasing. Let's see if we can find it because this is all very confusing to read, so please bear with me. I want to see the people that he's quoting here because he's not an expert in autism. He's not even an expert in all cluster B personality disorders. He definitely has more validity in what he says because when he talks about narcissism being one himself, but that's about it. So, autistic traits and self conscious emotions in early childhood. Can I still remember it? Let's have a look now and see. So it is what he's saying, pretty much. So the study suggests that while children with higher autistic traits may experience less guilt and embarrassment, they might show more shame-like avoidance, which could affect their ability to navigate social situations and form connections with others. Understanding these dynamics is crucial for developing interventions that support social emotional development in children with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, in early childhood. This is the actual study, not what he's using to fit his narrative. There we have it there. Shanna van Thrift, sounds like a good Dutch name. Christina Coloressi, checked. Bye bye. Eddie Brummelman, Terence D. Jorgensen, Milica Nikolic, South Serbian or Croatian. Don't want to get the two mixed because I know they don't like each other. Check that out if you want as well. Just want to find their findings. I don't want to read through the whole thing, but you can check it out yourself if you want. So they're looking at guilt, shame, and embarrassment. See if we can just get to the end. I don't like skipping to the end of things, but I want to end this situation. There's a lot there. So, what did you find? There's all the citations there. So, so they obviously did a lot of research into this. Funding information, not interested. Author contributions. Conclusion, that's what we want. So, in conclusion, our work shows that children with more autistic traits, not necessarily have autism, but autistic traits, have more deficits in TOM, theory of mind, Tom, and show more shame like avoidance after a transgression in early childhood, which to me sounds like I fucked up, I'm embarrassed by this, I feel ashamed of myself, I'm going to avoid that situation. And I can 100% relate to that. Basically, you've been shamed, you feel embarrassed, so you avoid, right? You don't try and rectify the situation, you withdraw, which would definitely resonate with me. But someone who is antisocial or narcissistic doesn't have that. They don't have the empathy. He's trying to claim that, and he said it before in a video where he says that high functioning autism, autism level one, I think it's called, um, not exactly sure on what they call it now, autism spectrum disorder though, higher functioning and narcissism are indistinguishable, according to Sam Vaknin. Whereas the paper that he's actually quoting here doesn't sound like it backs up what he's saying at all. So this implies that children with high levels of autistic traits may have difficulties in how they relate to other people early in development, especially when there is a threat to social status and existing relationships due to a transgression. You've had an argument or something and it's awkward, it's difficult for you to deal with. As shame is known to hinder the repairment of social relationships after wrongdoing, it may cause young children with more autistic traits to feel not socially connected. Therefore, new intervention strategies to regulate shame through enhancing self compassion, such as mindfulness and intervention, Chang et al. 2019, which have been found to be effective in preschool children, Fluck et al. 2015, and in older children with ASD. Example, Hartley et al. 2019, Riderinkoff et al. 2017 may be considered when targeting children with more autistic traits. Anything else we need to add? A lot of children and parents with Dutch ethnicity. Interesting. So our study also had limitations. First, our study used a community sample and parent-reported levels of autistic traits, so not children diagnosed. Children in our sample had an average level of autistic traits comparable to children from community samples in other studies. A study assessing the prevalence of parent-reported ASD, clinical levels of autistic traits in children reported percentages. So this basically means that the prevalence of clinical levels of autistic traits in the study was higher than in the general population. Okay. So these are self-reported. It's not actually children who are diagnosed with autism, but they have high traits. So that's not even valid in the sense of autistic people are, because you can't say that. So again, it's traits. Yeah, it's not talking about actual. Yeah. So when I just read through it here, and it says second, our study focused on children aged 2 to 5 years, thereby showing that disturbances in shame-like avoidance already exist in early childhood. I was going to say the same thing. You've already got these responses at that age. Children don't know what they've done wrong until you tell them whether they have autistic traits or not. So, thereby showing that disturbances in shame-like avoidance already exist, but expressions of guilt, embarrassment, and non-verbal shame, like avoidance, seem unaffected at this age. Uh-huh. Okay. So they acknowledge, in fairness, the limitations. Like, I think, as they've acknowledged themselves, most children don't know they've done something wrong until you tell them they've done something wrong. They pick up on the tone of the voice, maybe. So this is all theoretical, it's not, yeah, you can look at that if you want. I'm not going to read any more of that. I'm going to stop sharing now. And I don't think what they're saying in that study backs up what Sam Vaknin is saying at all. Um, and I quoted Professor Simon Baron Cohen before, cousin of Sasha Baron Cohen, who is an expert in autism. And what he said, so he's far more qualified than Sam Vaknin. And I already discussed that in my video where I talk about antisocial personality disorder versus autism spectrum disorder. So you want to check that one out. It's right next to the NPD one. So if you want to just have a look, let's have a look at what the expert says. Why not? Let's go into it now. So Simon Baron Cohen is an expert. Let's have a look now. See, I mentioned it before, but we may as well have a look at it now. So Simon Baron Cohen's theories on autism and psychopathy highlight the differences in cognitive and affective empathy. Autism is associated with high levels of morality, where individuals may act as whistleblowers when they perceive others breaking the rules. Very rules based, 100%. In contrast, psychopathy is marked by high levels of amorality, where individuals show little to no empathy for others' feelings or suffering. Baron Cohen's theory suggests that while autistic individuals may struggle with cognitive empathy, I don't know what's wrong with you, but when I do, I will help you. So they often retain or even heighten effective empathy, leading to a moral code based on fairness and justice to make sense of the world. Psychopaths, on the other hand, lack the moral compass developed through empathy and the moral code developed through strong systemizing, a high need for rules. Let's look at Simon Baron Cohen, cousin of Borat. There he is. So, clinical psychologist, a fellow at Trinity College, not Dublin now, I looked it up before. So you can see this, and if we look up New College, Oxford, he should come up as alumni, hopefully. Yeah, nobody pops up there. Want to do my due diligence. Okay, let's check the other university then. I don't want to be doing a deep dive into Sam Vaknin if I'm not going to do the same with Simon Baron Cohen. Yeah, cousin of Sasha. Let's see. We should pop up here. There is a lot of alumni here. Stephen Hawking popping up. Yeah, like we could spend all day doing this. Popular culture. Oh, so many. Autism Research Centre. So he's the director there. Yeah, okay. So you can see his name associated there. And you can do your own background checks on it. Look, you don't have to take my word for everything, but do your own research. Absolutely, yes. I just think what Sam Vaknin says is harmful. I don't think he's qualified to speak on behalf of autistic people. As you've seen there, his qualifications are questionable at best, and very little of what he says is verifiable. Um, I just think he's doing a lot of harm by making these assumptions. And I talked about Roy Meadows and the danger of people being perceived as experts. I'm not an expert, you know. He knows more about narcissistic personality disorder than I do. 100%, I'll take that. That's fair enough. Probably knows a hell of a lot more about psychology than I do as well, or philosophy anyway. But he's not an expert in autism. and he doesn't know more than a person who has autism. So, a personal account, just to kind of give it to you, I have definitely struggled to understand what I've done wrong before, but when I knew I was doing something wrong, I aimed to fix it. There was always a need to play by the rules. It's just that a lot of people don't do that and they get by. I don't think autistic people are incapable of lying. No. Um, I think by the very nature that we mask, we're lying to people. But that doesn't mean that we're doing it because it's negative. People tell white lies all the time, because they don't want to hurt people's feelings. Like, does my bum look big in this dress if your girlfriend or your wife says it to you? And I might say yes, but that's because I do like a bigger bum. I like a curvy girl, so I don't see that as a bad thing. A girl said it to me before she asked me, and she was quite good looking, and she asked me, she was a friend, like she's not a girlfriend, but quite attractive, and she asked me, "Oh, Dan, does my bum look big in this dress?" And I was like, "Yeah, but it looks good." Being honest. And she was kind of laughing, like she knew that I was saying it in a good way, because she kind of just looked at me and went, "Oh my God, did you really say that?" And I went, "Yeah, but that's a good thing." And then she kind of smiled and went, "Oh, thanks," and gave me a hug, and I was there kind of thinking, I like this. um, you know what I mean, though? When they say it, they think, "Oh, it means I'm fat," but not necessarily. I prefer it. I prefer someone like that than someone who's flat like a pancake. Just a personal preference of mine, but I mean, I'm not going to tell a girl she looks hideous or ugly. I know that much. I know when to say, "No, you look great. You look great," even though I think you look terrible. Like when I went to Longitude before, and the girls literally looked like string beef in stuff that's bed onto them and fat folds showing. Not pleasant. But you can have a laugh and a joke. I'm not this emotionless robot that people like to picture autistic people as being. You know, like, just to give you an example that pops into my head. I remember before I was watching The Simpsons as a kid, and I accidentally called the kid Homer. I couldn't remember his name, and I called him Homer, and I went, "Oh, shit." And I didn't say shit because I didn't know shit at the time, but I kind of laughed, and nobody heard me. And then the teacher said, "What's so funny, Dan?" And then I said, "Oh, I accidentally called Homer." And I was laughing and joking, and she went, "Oh, that's disgraceful. Why did you say that?" She brought me out of the class and gave out to me. And the other kid didn't even know what I'd said to him. He was perfectly fine the way he was. I didn't mean anything negative by it. I literally had The Simpsons in my head. I was laughing, and I called him Homer. I think his name was Oron, which is an Irish name. And he didn't hear me. No damage was done. I didn't mean anything negative by it, and I know I didn't mean anything by it. I was literally thinking about a funny cartoon I was watching, though it's gone downhill since. But she then brought that up, and he started crying because I could tell by the tone of her voice that she thought that I'd done something wrong, even though I hadn't, in my opinion, because I was there thinking I didn't mean to hurt his feelings. He didn't hear me saying something that I didn't mean to say, and he wasn't crying. And then after you spoke to him, he started crying. And then you called me out of class. I didn't know what I'd done wrong. You didn't explain what I'd done wrong. And I was just expected to know, even though I was in primary school. I didn't know what I'd done wrong. Another good example of this, and just how stupid adults can be. My brother had a friend who was mixed race, so his dad was black and his mum was white. And there was a joke going around, would you ever kiss a BMW? And he said yes. It was like, ah, you'd kiss a black man's willy. That's what it was called, BMW, black man's willy. My brother said he meant nothing by it. He'd heard the joke before, but his friend thought that he was trying to make fun of him. He literally didn't see colour. He just saw his friend and said a joke to him. Obviously, his friend got kind of upset. Fair enough. But then my brother was called out in front of his whole class, brought to the principal's office, a primary school kid as well, and accused of being a racist. He didn't even know what the fucking term meant. He didn't even know what that meant. He was asked, was he a racist? And he said, what does that mean? That just shows the stupidity of adults, doesn't it? You know? So I think with autistic people, we can be quite naive. We're not all the same, just like no narcissist is the same. But if you're a narcissist by nature, then you are exploitative of people. That's how you get the diagnosis. If you're antisocial, you exploit people. The same is not required for an autism diagnosis. What is required is that you have social deficits. You don't pick up on social cues as easily. I would definitely relate to if something was embarrassing or I felt ashamed of myself, I wouldn't then apologize. Well, sometimes I'd apologize, but I would avoid the situation because I'd associate that with the negative emotion. You know what I mean? And that's kind of how agoraphobia starts. You associate a panic attack with a shopping centre. You don't go to that shopping centre. Blind Boy Boat Club was talking about that, one of the rubber bandits. So I would definitely resonate with that. If something happened to me and I was in a certain place and I had a panic attack or I said something stupid or I embarrassed myself, I would then want to avoid that place at all costs because of the shame and guilt I feel. Someone who has antisocial personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder, these are people who we would call psychopaths or sociopaths. Usually, they're not official terms, and I've looked that up. That's not just me making that up. Antisocial personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder. These people manipulate. They lack empathy, but they know what people. They're able to read people's emotions. They're usually quite asocial. Sorry, pro-social. Um, Meaning that they can hold down the conversation, tell people what they want to hear, charming and deceitful, very manipulative and good at exploiting people. I would say autistic people by nature are very bad at that because we don't know what people are generally thinking and we don't pick up on social cues as easily. That's not saying people with autism are incapable of abusing people. And I think one point that Sam Vaknin makes that I will agree with is if you're autistic and you grow up in a household where you're shunned and belittled, you might develop a hatred for humanity and you might develop maladaptive coping strategies. And in that case, maybe the autism could lead to narcissism because a bit of you is destroyed inside, so you then develop a coping mechanism. And I do think there's definitely a link with narcissism, antisocial personality, and trauma, Whereas with autism, there is not necessarily a need for trauma. I don't think there is anyway. I think you're born with it. It's a neurodevelopmental condition where your brain doesn't quite work like it should, but you can then become an expert in a certain field or devote a lot of time and attention. Sometimes I can just remember things like that. I was only joking about it the other day. I remember the manager of the Uruguayan football team, Oscar Tavares, back in 2010 in the World Cup. I was only 12. I don't know how I can remember that. I can remember almost the entire team. I've always liked the Uruguay football team, so they've always been my favourite underdogs. Luis Suarez, Diego Forlan, Diego Godin, Jose Maria Jimenez, Diego Lugano, which most people probably don't know, Maxi Pereira, with the little mole on the side of his face. What a player. Really good engine on him. Alvaro Pereira, and of course in the goal, Fernando Muslera, played for Galatasaray for I think 16 years. But you just see how I can recall that. And there is definitely a gift to that, right? But I don't claim I've got a genius level IQ. I know that I'm probably not that much above average. I do have certain areas where I'm quite smart and I can recall things, but I'm not claiming I have an IQ of 180. I'm not a child prodigy or whatever. I just think it's dangerous ground, and it adds more stigma to autism. So I wanted to call this bullshit out. Like I say, if you want to keep watching Sam Vaknin, I still watch his stuff. I think some of it's interesting, even just to get his take on it as a diagnosed narcissist. I think it's interesting to hear what he says, but don't take it as gospel because his credentials are questionable at best, and at worst, he's just fabricated everything. So you make up your own mind. What I say isn't gospel, neither is what he says, and I just want to put out information there. I don't want this channel to become about bad mouthing a lot of people, but I think misinformation needs to be called out. That need for justice that we artists have. Misinformation getting spread is just something I don't like. And he's kind of making the connection that autism and narcissism, they're one and the same, or if not, they're very closely linked, which they are not. You can have both. And if you're raised where all your demands are given into, which he says is a form of abuse, which I think is true because you're not preparing the child for real life. I think he can make a lot of interesting and valid points, but saying that high level autism or high functioning autism and narcissism are indistinguishable is just bullshit. It's wrong. He keeps calling it Asperger's or Asperger's because that was the man's name, but it sounds like Asperger's. So people laugh. South Park took the piss out of it, rightly so as well. It is funny. You have to laugh. But he calls it Asperger's disorder. I have heard some people referring to it as that, but more commonly Asperger's syndrome, which is no longer an official diagnosis, by the way. So look, make up your own mind. He's not an expert in psychology. He has a PhD from a defunct university in philosophy, and he claims that he is a child genius and people just didn't understand him. I'm not sure how much of that I believe, but I'm going to end this video now. You make up your own minds, guys, and don't believe everything you hear. Don't believe everything I say. Check it out. Look at the papers I've looked at there, and make up your own mind. All right. See you later. It's long a fall.